On behalf of the Science Library and the Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences, I welcome you all to this PhD day. It's the second PhD day. We had the first one last year, and of course, the topic of this day is science communication. The poster session started about an hour ago, and the jury is working, and it's a pleasure for me later today at about 3:15 to announce the winner from here. I don't know yet, so I have to wait for the jury's decision. At this opening, we have the great pleasure of having two important persons here at the podium. And of course, they are my two bosses. And the first one is the Ministry of Research and Education, Torbjørn Isaksen. You definitely know him. We are very pleased that you are here, and I will give you the podium now right away. So please, Torbjørn, the podium is yours. You can stay over.
Der, hallo. Hello? Hello? Alle kan høre meg? Is it on? Yeah? And you can hear me in the back? There's an old there's an old story about I think it was about Einar Gerhardsen, one of Norway's greatest prime ministers, a post-war prime minister, and he was at a meeting at a time when the technology was not as advanced as now, and he did the same thing as I did. He said, "Can you hear me?" And he asked the people in the back, "Can you hear me?" And one person answered, "I can hear you, but I'll gladly change places with somebody who can't hear you." So it's very nice to be here to talk to you and say a little bit about communication and research, because that's one of the things we're most interested in. As a Minister of Research and Education, I'm quite used to meeting smart people. I have to tell you that. But it's not that often that I meet so many smart people in one place, and so much brain power collected in one place. Certainly not in, well, Parliament, for example. I don't think it's ever happened. We might be closer in government, but I'm not too sure. So I think this is a really good day for you. It's an important part of what the university does and this faculty does as well, because it's a great way to meet each other across disciplinary boundaries, learn some new skills, and also to talk about how you can communicate your research to a wider audience. And I'll come back to this point, but I want to emphasize right away that it's easy in a country like Norway, and in most countries, at least a majority of countries now, to think that the scientific way of thinking is so ingrained that you don't really have to explain it to people again. But what we're seeing, and as I mentioned, I'll come back to this, what we're seeing is that even the fundamental scientific way of thinking is constantly being questioned, even coming under attack. And that's why it's so important for scientists and for PhD scientists to participate and communicate their research. It's also about showing fundamentally what is science about. So I've been asked to say something about how why is it important to communicate research? And I think in a way the answer is self-evident. It's self-evident in the way that if you don't share your knowledge, then it doesn't really get the benefit, or it's not being used the way it should be. But that's more sharing with the scientific community. You subject your science to scrutiny. You subject it to peer review. It's an important part of the scientific project. What you also do when you communicate to a wider audience is that you subject your science to the scrutiny of an enlightened audience. And that in itself is important. And it's also a part of strengthening the culture of knowledge in the society you're living in. Newton famously said that if I've achieved anything, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. But in a way, you're not standing just on the shoulders of giants. What you're doing as a scientist is standing on the shoulders, not even the shoulders, you're standing on a heap of people, a big pile of people, all the scientists who during their day has contributed small parts to the knowledge that we share today, our collective library of knowledge, so to say. I talk a lot about these days about the need to restructure and reform Norway's economy. As you all know, we're an oil and gas producing country. We've had a lot of good years relying on oil and gas. Now the oil price, the gas price is sinking, and it's emphasized in a way the need for reform and the need to think new thoughts. It's not something new because we already knew we had to reform. We knew we were, for example, going through a great green shift over to a more carbon-friendly, environment-friendly, non-carbon economy. But this has accentuated the need for reform. The bright side for a country like Norway of emphasizing the need for reform is that these are also good times for good ideas. It's probably easier to get a good idea across if people are thinking, well, some of the things we're doing today we might have to do differently in the future and not just relying on the status quo. Who are the most knowledgeable people around? Who can participate and bring new knowledge into the important debate about the future? Well, it's people like you, for example. A fair number of you won't be pursuing an academic career either, so you'll bring your knowledge into the workforce. How to communicate your knowledge and communicate the research is an important skill to have as well if you're going out of academia and into the workforce. I saw the agenda for today, and there are lectures on how to write a press release, how to get published, how to pimp your research. I'm not quite sure, well, I understand what it is, but I would really love to stick around for that lecture. And these are important skills, but communicating research is not just about popularizing it. It's not just about reaching out. It's also, in a way, a cornerstone of civilization. In antiquity, for example, the Romans made a lot of great scientific progress. They were great engineers, for example, and a lot of you have probably seen the movie Life of Brian by Monty Python. It's one of my favorite movies. And there's a scene there where they're discussing what have the Romans ever done for us. And they come up with a list, well, not really a lot except for the aqueduct, sanitation, the roads, medication, education, irrigation. So the Romans obviously made a difference through their scientific discoveries, but also through the use of those scientific discoveries. The Pantheon in Rome, Emperor Hadrian's temple to all the gods with a gigantic dome, is a very good example in brick and stone about what the Romans contributed. Today, 2,000 years, or almost 2,000 years later, it's still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, 43 meters both in height and diameter. So you'd think that the Romans, once they knew how to construct a structure like that they would build it anywhere, that any town or big city in the Roman Empire would have a structure like this, like the Pantheon in Rome. But it was actually the other way around. Too few people knew how to build it. And with the decline of the Roman Empire, the knowledge about how to create a structure like that was actually forgotten. There were no more domes in Italy for hundreds of years, except for this one. Not until the Renaissance genius Filippo Brunelleschi managed to rediscover the technique when constructing the dome of the Florence Cathedral in the 15th century, one of the most beautiful and spectacular cathedrals in Europe. So it's not so much standing on the shoulders of giants as having to reconstruct the shoulders of giants as well. So the loss of such knowledge as that seems banal today, because so much information is always there at our fingertips. So it seems that the prospect of us losing an insight that we have today is almost impossible. But we really don't have any guarantee that knowledge that we've achieved will continue to be there. This is why, for example, CERN has developed an open source solution to manage digital assets such as research data to make sure they're not lost in the future. But knowledge doesn't even have to be lost, literally lost, to fall into disuse. scientific debate and scientific method is a good example. It's proven beyond any reasonable doubt that vaccines contribute to eradicate, or not even contribute. Vaccines were the reason why we were able to nearly eradicate diseases like polio or tuberculosis. Still, even in Norway, this winter, we've had a debate about whether whether children should be vaccinated or not. The outbreak of measles in both Europe and in the US have shown that it's not enough for the science just to be there and for the knowledge just to be there. It has to be communicated. It has to be communicated to people in a language they understand. It's actually a matter of life and death in some instances as well. So in order to achieve scientific results, we have to use we have to gain from science. We have to use the scientific results. And that also means we have to communicate. And we also have to fight for science. Even in Norway, the scientific method and the very fundamental way of reasoning, of trying to prove a theory, is constantly from different sides being questioned or being attacked or just simply being misunderstood. A lot of people, I think, in academia think that if I want to communicate my science, I have to dumb it down. For example, if I write a press release, I won't get all the nuances that I actually have, for example, when talking about my conclusion. And that's probably right. You have to dumb your science down in order to reach a wider audience, or you have to be more pedagogical when you explain it. I had the honor and the privilege of meeting the two Abel Prize winners this year. John F. Nash Jr., who in a very tragic accident passed away, was killed, and Louis Nuremberg. And I tried to read up on what is it actually they've gotten the Abel Prize for. My background is political science, not mathematics. And they won because of their, quote, striking and seminal contributions to the theory of nonlinear partial differential equations, PDEs, and its applications to geometric analysis. For most of you, this is probably like saying they won for, this is understandable. For me as a layman, this makes no sense at all. It's impossible for me. So what happened? Why did I still manage to grasp what the research of these two great thinkers was really about? It was because a mathematician, Jure Iselin, who's also famous outside the boundaries of the mathematical community, he wrote an op-ed in Aftenposten, the biggest daily newspaper in Norway, trying to explain to a layman like me and to all the others out there, what is this work really about? And he wrote, "The world doesn't stand still, so to understand the world, one has to be able to calculate change." He wrote, "It's hard to overstate the importance of PDEs for our modern society. Understanding the weather, PDE, modern communication technology, PDE, the gas flow in pipes from the Norwegian continental shelf to Europe, PDE, Einstein's general theory of relativity, PDE." He's a specialist mathematician, but through writing this, he communicated with laymen, with people like me, and with non-mathematicians all through Norway. And this made me realize that what Nash and Nuremberg, their work, is actually grappled with is a thing I've worked with myself, namely managing change. There's an ancient philosopher called Heraclit, and he said that a man never steps into the same river twice, because it's not the same man and it's not the same river. This is an essential way of communicating and broadening the horizon for very specific research. So my appeal to you is tell people about your work. Try to, some would say dumb it down, others would say pimp it up. Try to make it accessible and understandable. Make the most of your work also for a wider audience, And doing that, you're also contributing to the vital quality that a society will actually understand and appreciate the scientific way of thinking. You have an excellent opportunity to learn more about this today, and I'm thankful for being here, and I'm thankful for you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Torbjørn, and I'm glad that you mentioned the Abel Prize winners. In the building besides us here, we have our PD group on the nonlinear PDEs, and it's known to be one of the strongest groups worldwide. For example, the group has 3 ERC grants at the moment, and that's rare for a fairly small group like that. The Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences, we have about 700 PhD students enrolled in our program. That's about 1/4 of the whole PhD students at the University of Oslo. However, we have a Faculty of Medicine, and our next speaker comes from the Faculty of Medicine. He is now the rector at the University of Oslo. They have more PhD students and us, almost twice as many. So I'm glad it's a pleasure for me to introduce my boss, Rector Ole Petter Ottersen.
Dear Minister, what's happening here? Well, dear Minister, dear PhD students, dear guests, first of all, I must say that Morten Dæhlen is right. There is a healthy competition between the different faculties when it comes to the number of PhD candidates. And by coincidence, yesterday we had the promotion ceremony in the aula. And I'm sorry to say, your faculty was severely beaten by the medical faculty. The medical faculty had 35 new doctors, and you had 20, I think. But this is the kind of competition that we should have. And I think it's amazing, this initiative that has now been taken on the part of the PhD candidates to promote what is so important, and that is science communication. I must say I was a bit nervous when I listened to our minister's talk, because he said that he's really in such a knowledgeable society or company like this one. But I should remind the minister, and those of you who attend, that when our minister made a comparison with our parliament, the parliament is bound to make very important decisions on the 11th of June that will bear directly on our future. There will be decisions about structure and leadership in the universities. So I do hope, dear Torbjørn, that the parliament is not that far behind when it comes to knowledge, because the decisions they are about to do are truly important for us all. That was the political message for today. In fact, I will try to follow up on Life of Brian. Life of Brian is fantastic. It tells us also everything about science communication and why we should communicate science. And I'm going to touch upon this in a second. And I'm very glad that we included also the word education, by the way, in this quote from What Did the Romans Do to Us, because education is a key word in that exchange of quotes. But in Life of Brian, how many of you have ever watched Life of Brian? Wow, okay. So you might catch me here, because perhaps I'm not really that into the details when it comes to this exchange that occurs in Life of Brian, but I'm trying to give more or less what transpires in this fantastic communication. Because Brian says that you shouldn't necessarily follow me. You are all individuals he says. Remember? And the crowd says, yes, we are all individuals. And then Brian says, you are all different. And the crowd says, yes, we are all different. But then there is a guy far in the back. He says, I'm not. I'm not. And now we are at the point here. Because we are all different today. But we differ in a different way compared to what was the case in the Roman Empire. We are different, but we are different because we command different sets and kinds of expertise. We are in a knowledge society now, where we should sort of change our minds when it comes to the perception of what is around us. Around us is not a crowd that is waiting for the signals from us, the experts. We are part of a knowledge society. And there are different people out there with different sets of expertise. And now I'm at the point. It's very rewarding to engage in the communication with those that command different sets of expertise. This is the way we should look at science communication, an exchange of idea and information and knowledge between different cohorts, different populations with different sets, different kinds of knowledge. So excuse me for saying so, Torbjørn, we should not be motivated by the Norwegian law, that this is the fourth task of the university. This doesn't reach our hearts, does it? At least not mine. We should not really say that, okay, it's so important for a university to communicate, simply because it is important for a university to communicate. This doesn't reach my heart. We should simply say that in the modern world, where we all command different kinds of expertise, we should use the opportunity to get into an exchange of ideas with those other communities, because it's rewarding for us. And it's also rewarding, and I mean, I've been through this as a scientist myself. I published more than 400 papers, I think, and many of those papers have been communicated into the newspapers. And each time I found it extremely rewarding. Why? Because when you sit down to write something for the newspaper, for instance, or for a different medium, you are forced to think differently about your own research. You put your research into a different context. And my God, this is rewarding. This is the way I believe one should frame science communication as something that is so rewarding for yourself and for your career. So just to repeat, don't even dare to look at Norwegian legislation and universitets- og høyskoleloven. Listen rather to your heart and how important it is and how rewarding it is to engage in communication with those out there. I shan't keep on now forever. I would just say that when you're talking about science communication, the only place to talk about science communication, of course, is here. The Science Library has already gained a reputation in a positive sense as being the star in the crown of the University of Oslo when it comes to science communication. So I think one of the wise ideas that popped up many, many years ago to transform this floor into a science library was indeed a very wise one. And we are profiting from that decision this very day. I wish you all the best for your future career. And in this future career, the respect for the knowledge out there should be taken care of. And of course, you should find reward in what you have embarked on today, science communication. The very last point, just to illustrate what I'm talking about, is, I had the name here. I was looking at a poster here by Mohammed Kibaya. Are you here? Could you come up to the front, please? Because I think this very poster tells you, not in generic terms, but in real terms, what science communication is all about. Come on. This is the first time I met Mohammed, but he has a poster in the far end of the corridor. It's about the ashy red colobus monkey in the Mbuzi forest in Tanzania. I was just visiting Tanzania myself. The point is that what you have discovered, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, what you have discovered is that there is a particular type or species of primates in Mbuzi forest, right? The ashy monkey. And what you have discovered, moreover, is that this species is threatened now. Yes, it's becoming, or it could become extinct. You have discovered this, and it's part of your master thesis.
Yes.
So, what is science communication about? Imagine if this information were to be just hidden in peer-reviewed papers. Would that make a difference? Isn't it the point now to ensure that there will be a new conservation strategy that takes care of these monkeys?
Hello? Hello? Do you hear me? Okay. My findings is just to trigger conservation attention from various people from the world in order to conserve the monkeys. But not only conserving the monkeys, but the forest, because the forest is a catchment forest. That means all the water that the local communities use drain from that particular forest. So that means for a wildlife person like me, I have to make use of the monkeys to seek support from various people from various parts of the world to make sure that I protect the forest by making use of the species as a flagship species to protect the forest. But the intention is there just to make sure that the forest is there to still serving as to be serving as a catchment forest.
Okay, you will be available for questions later on. My finishing comment is simply this. This information that you have provided as part of your research must be made available to the society at large, to the politicians, to the local communities, in order to be of any use. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And a last reference to the life of Brian must come now. It has to do with something that is happening at the end of the movie. And there are ups and downs in research, but always look on the bright side of life. Okay.